The piece you just heard was a selection of preludes from Hotteterre's L'Art de Préluder sur la Flute Traversiere et autres instruments de dessus. My name is Flavia Hirte and I play the flute in Ensemble Molière. Today I would like to tell you a little bit more about my instrument and its history. Since Ensemble Molière focuses mainly on French Baroque music and music that is inspired by this music, and we tend to play a lot of arrangements of beautiful music spanning all the way from Lully to Rameau, I tend to play on Baroque flutes that are from the middle of that time span. This flute is a copy of a J.H. Rottenburgh by Rudolf Tutz Sr. And sometimes I also play my Bizey copy by Giovanni Tardino. Rottenburgh was a Flemish flute maker in the first half of the 18th century, and Bizey was a flute maker in Paris at around the same time. These flutes, that come in 4 parts with 1 key, were a great innovation around 1700 and became ever more popular all across Europe. The 1 key allowed flute players to finally play beautiful D sharps / E flats, and this was also the time when they first appeared on fingering charts. The success of this flute is proven by the fact that even by the time Mozart started composing for the flute, these flutes were still played. We even know that flute makers were still making them at the beginning of the 19th century, although by this point they were probably made more for amateur players than professionals. Even though this flute was so successful, the 1-keyed flute, I guess it's in human nature that people wanted to keep experimenting with flutes and flute models, and in case of the flute, this meant that more and more keys were added to it. Opinions on the qualities of the 1-keyed flute differ, and they even differed a lot in the 18th century. We flute players use the term forked fingerings for notes that are slightly more gentle in character and need a little bit more attention. The G sharp is a very good example of one of these notes. Basically, the G sharp is a flattened A. The A is a note that we call a strong note, whereas the G sharp is much more gentle in character. So has a fairly healthy sound, whereas the G sharp is a little bit more veiled, I guess. In general, the scale or the key on the Baroque flute that has the most strong notes in it is a D major scale, or D major. In general, we also prefer playing in sharp keys, but the further we get away from the D major in the circle of fifths, the more forked fingerings we use. This means that every key and every scale on the Baroque flute has its own individual character. These special qualities of the Baroque flute were maintained throughout the 18th century and far into the 19th century, even on flutes where more keys were added. This flute is an example of one with several more keys. It is a copy also by Rudolf Tutz of an instrument from Dresden by a maker called Grenser. This one has 8 keys. However, since these keys were basically added to a Baroque flute, we now have the choice, or the players then had the choice, of several different ways of playing one note. So for instance, on this flute we can play a G sharp with the G sharp key, which has now been added, which has a much stronger note sound, to the G sharp from the Baroque flute. Depending on the music, the performer now had the choice of 2 different sounds on the G sharp. The very big change in flutes and the flute development came in 1847, when the flautist and goldsmith Theobald Böhm from Germany essentially developed what we now understand as the modern flute. I've got my modern flute here as a direct visual comparison. Now, the very first striking difference is the fact that this is made of metal, or silver in this case, and the Baroque flute, or the historical flutes, were made of wood. However, this is not the only difference in these flutes. The more crucial differences that have an effect on the sound are to do with, first of all, the holes, the embouchure hole, as well as all the finger holes. On the modern flute, they are all much larger than on the Baroque flute. That's why every single one has a key, because we wouldn't be able to cover them completely with our fingers. The other difference is that the body of the Baroque flute has a different shape from the body of the modern flute. So starting where the head joint ends, the body of the Baroque flute tapers towards the end. It has a conical shape, so to speak. Whereas the modern flute, starting at the bottom of the head joint, has a cylindrical shape, basically like a toilet roll. And the Baroque flute is more like a cylinder, like this. Basically, the conical shape had an effect on or helped create the difference in sound quality from one note to the other, whereas the cylindrical shape of the modern flute supported the concept of an evenness in the chromaticism and across the registers. I hope that my little introduction into the last 300 years of flute history was informative and interesting, and that it will encourage you to look out for further videos by Ensemble Malier. Thank you very much.